The Rose of Jericho may sound like an ancient fable, but it's actually a very real plant. Well, scratch that. It is two very real plants. And both of them have a very real, very cool magic trick up their leafy sleeves. Hello, I'm OK Savage, and you're watching Sketchy Info Dumps, the series where you can listen to a bunch of interesting facts and watch me draw something vaguely related. Okay, considering that the two plants called the Rose of Jericho are also known as the false Rose of Jericho and the true Rose of Jericho, let's start by figuring out what the differences are between them. I will say first that neither of them are actually roses, and they don't look anything like roses. So they're obviously very different to the rose that I'm drawing here. The rose drawing and the fact that someone who's very important to me was talking about Rose of Jericho recently, just those two things combined made me think of this. Anyway, on to the roses of Jericho. The true Rose of Jericho, Anastatica hyracontica? Anastatica hyracontica? It's hard to say. I think Anastatica hyracontica grows mostly in the Middle East and North Africa and is less common than the false Rose of Jericho. It's part of the mustard family, or like brassicas if you've heard of them. This means it's related to loads of really, really tasty things like watercress, cabbages, cauliflower, all that good stuff. And of course, mustard, which is actually a cute leafy plant with little cute flowers and edible leaves that you can put in salad, and not a tree that you put a tap in and yellow glue comes out, as I may have thought briefly when I was a child. The yellow condiment that you eat from a jar with a spoon in the middle of the night. The yellow condiment is actually made from the ground up mustard seeds and a bunch of other ingredients, but it's the mustard seeds that give it that unique sort of almost spicy flavour. If you want to know what the best sort of mustard is, it's Dijon mustard, and I will not be taking arguments at this point in time. Anastatica may be part of this family, but it certainly doesn't look like a cabbage. It can grow to about a foot wide, half as tall, and it's got little itty bitty cute white flowers. The false Rose of Jericho, Selaginella lepidophylla. Trying to say these is so distracting. The false Rose of Jericho is found in the Chihuahuan Desert of Mexico, New Mexico, and Arizona, and generally like in the Americas. It isn't a brassica, part of the mustard family. It's actually a sort of spike moss, which does sound like something straight out of Hollow Knight. Funnily enough, spike mosses aren't actually mosses, kind of like how a jellyfish isn't a fish. They're also not ferns, even though you might assume that at first glance from the appearance. They're kind of unique and live in their own little biological category, which is really cool. Apparently, a lot of people use spike mosses for their terrariums, which sounds really cute, actually. The false Rose of Jericho is also sometimes called the dinosaur plant, which instantly makes me love it. So, onto the meat of this. What is so special about the Rose of Jericho? Well, both the true rose and the false Rose of Jericho are sometimes nicknamed resurrection plants, which again, sounds like something straight out of Hollow Knight. It's real, I swear. Basically, these plants can dry up to the point of looking like sad little tumbleweeds. Anyone who was looking at it who didn't know what it was would probably just assume, oh, this is like a dead clump of brush. Like, they look very dead, not just, oh, I didn't water my house plant in 2 weeks and now it's a bit wilty and crinkly. No, like dead, like they look like sticks. Like, alas, 'tis nothing but a husk of the plant it once was. But then something magical happens. The Rose of Jericho can come back to life. It's like a just add water sort of thing. basically, you get them wet, give it a little time, and where you had dried up corpses, or what appeared to be, you now have fresh foliage, like magic. The true Rose of Jericho is a little bit more complicated, but the false Rose of Jericho can legitimately revive itself from literally just being like sat in a puddle. Just splish splosh, have some necromancy. Because of this sort of seemingly magical ability to raise up from the dead, both the true Rose of Jericho and the false Rose of Jericho have been very, very important to a lot of different people throughout a lot of different times, and still are. There's a bunch of different religions that regard them as being special or important. There's been poems written about them. There's been, like, medicines that use them, and still are. There's been a bunch of scientific research done regarding them because of their ability to resist drought in this very special way. Honestly, that's quite the CV for a plant, if you ask me. I can't actually find out why the false Rose of Jericho is sometimes called the dinosaur plant, which is really frustrating me. Like, what a cool name, but why? All I can assume is that it's because it's similar to those little dinosaurs that come in the egg, and then you put the egg in water and it hatches and you get a big foam dinosaur. Did you ever have one of those? I was obsessed with them as a kid. I don't think it's actually called that because of those, but that's my pet theory, since I cannot find out where the name dinosaur plant has actually come from. Interestingly enough, if you're ever trying to cultivate a Rose of Jericho, or you see one at a garden centre or whatever, it's much more likely to be a false Rose of Jericho, the spike moss type, rather than a true Rose of Jericho, the mustard family type. The false one is way more popular, way more common, and way easier to grow outside of its natural habitat. This is partly because the false Rose of Jericho, as part of its life cycle, naturally turns into this dormant sort of tumbleweed state and then blows about in this dormant state, still alive, but kind of, very protected, until it finds some moisture to revive itself. So obviously that's a really hardy plant. Whereas the true Rose of Jericho does also turn into a tumbleweed, but when that gets uprooted and blown about, it does die for real. On that note, I've been talking about resurrection and coming back from the dead a lot, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. I think this is the point where it's important to mention, if the plant can be resurrected, it wasn't actually dead. Instead, what happens with resurrection plants is they go into a state of sort of like suspended animation, where they become dormant when conditions are unfavourable, and then when conditions are favourable again, they sort of exit this state and revive themselves. It's almost, you can think of the animal equivalent as being like hibernation. Technically and confusingly, the false Rose of Jericho is a true resurrection plant, but the true Rose of Jericho is not a true resurrection plant. This is because whilst the false Rose of Jericho does do the going dormant and then reviving thing, the true Rose of Jericho does something slightly different. The true Rose of Jericho, Anastatica, actually does die when it becomes a tumbleweed and gets uprooted and starts bouncing about. It is dead at that point. From what I can tell from reading up on it, it will still appear to be alive, because it will undergo physical changes when you apply water to it. But it seems like what's actually happening here is when the moisture's rehydrating it, it's causing the dead plant material to expand, which then releases the seeds inside, which can then spread and germinate. This can lead to the illusion of new growth, partly because of the opening up of the plant as it sucks up the water and the plant material rehydrates, and partly because when some of the seeds get stuck to the plant and germinate on the plant, that can be mistaken for new growth, because, well, it is new growth, but it's not the same plant, it's its baby. The original plant is still dead. What you're looking at is the next generation of that plant. Apparently, some of this is disputable though, and a lot of the sources that I looked through said vastly different things about the extent of the resurrection powers of the Rose of Jericho, the True Rose of Jericho, and the Statica. So I would say, if you want a definitive answer, go and look that up yourself or talk to someone who's an expert in it, because I'm definitely not. In general, though, it does seem to be accepted that Anastatica is a plant that goes through an annual life cycle where it flowers, has seeds, then dies at some point in the dry season and opens up in the rainy season to allow the seeds to spread and become the next generation of this plant. So to recap, the Rose of Jericho is an amazing example of how plants can have the most confusing names. If you try to research the Rose of Jericho, most of the information you'll find up top will actually be about the false Rose of Jericho, not the true Rose of Jericho, which is very confusing because the false Rose of Jericho is from the Americas, nowhere near and nothing to do with Jericho, the Palestinian city for which the Rose of Jericho was originally named. Neither of them are actually roses or look anything like roses. Very confusing. Plus, they're both referred to as resurrection plants, and part of Anastatica's scientific name does have something to do with resurrection, but only the false Rose of Jericho is a true resurrection plant. Also very confusing. What a delightfully magical, weird, and brain-melting pair of plants to have researched. That was a lot of fun. If I've got anything wrong here, feel free to let me know in the comments. Please do put sources if you can. I'll be putting a few of mine in the description, so you can check them out for yourself if you want. And I'm always happy to learn new things, so you share yours with me too. Also, because we've been talking about a plant that is named after a Palestinian city, and obviously what's going on in Palestine at the moment is very much not okay, I would like to direct attention to that for a moment. I've put a link in the description to an article that can point you in the direction of some really useful charities you might consider donating to if you have the means that offer aid and support to people suffering in the Palestinian genocide at the moment. It's not mentioned in the article, but I personally send regular donations to Friends of Al-Aqsa, which is an NGO that focuses on raising awareness, pressuring the UK government to stop arming Israel, and trying to change the political climate so that governments and corporations and organisations have to do more to stop what's happening, essentially. You can set up a monthly donation with them from as little as £3 a month. So whilst they don't deal as much with direct aid, it's still a really accessible way to do something important that's hopefully going to help a lot of people if we can just keep pushing for that political change. I'll leave a link to their website too. Okay, that's me just about done. Thanks for watching. Please remember to do all the YouTube things like liking and subscribing and all of that. It's good stuff. Thank you. Also, if you found this on YouTube, you're actually watching it at least a week after it originally came out on Patreon, which is, something to consider. I'll leave that link in the description too. If you are watching this a week before everyone else on Patreon, thank you very much. Love you loads. Okay, that's me actually done this time. Yeah, thanks. Bye. Have a good one.